In a diagonal lashing, the wrapping turns cross the poles diagonally, hence its name. As in the traditional diagonal lashing, the Mark II diagonal lashing, also known as the Filipino diagonal lashing, is used when there is a need to close a gap between two spars. In other words, when we want to bind poles together where they cross each other, but do not touch. Start the lashing by halving the rope and placing the bight formed in the middle behind the poles between the upper diagonal. Reeve the ends through the bight, forming a lark's head. Pull both ends tightly to the right, drawing the two poles together. Begin the wraps by carrying both ends behind the poles in the opposite diagonal to the lark's head, and then in front of the poles along the same diagonal. Start wrapping in the other diagonal by passing both ends behind the rear pole and over the front pole. Next, carry both ends behind the rear pole, and it's time to start the frapping turns. Separate the ends and carry one over and one under the front pole. This will position the ends to frap in opposite directions between the poles. Take 2 or 3 frapping turns around the wraps, pulling each one tight. The Mark II, or Filipino diagonal lashing, is finished with a tight square knot. The other side of the Mark II diagonal lashing is symmetrical, with the wrapping turns forming an X on the rear pole, framed by 2 strands of rope on either side. Follow along as we go through the whole process again. Take notice how the Mark II diagonal lashing can be strengthened by taking an additional wrapping turn around each diagonal. Keep these wraps neat without overlapping the turns. As before, to begin the fraps, one end goes over and one end goes under the front pole. Around one diagonal, a lark's head. Pull it nice and tight to the right. Along the opposite diagonal, pass behind the rear pole and over the front pole. Next, pass behind the rear pole and over the front pole going around the other diagonal. Then pass behind the rear pole, separate the ends, one going over and the other under the front pole to frap. And as you proceed, pull it all tight and finish the Mark II diagonal lashing with a square knot.